Thank you very much, John. Okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get the four of them. Let's see, John and Bryn. We're also going to get Tyler Miller, who's in charge of our engineering team here at SketchUp, and Chris Keating, who's in charge of sort of the business side of the SketchUp thing. They're all going to kind of sit up here, and this is how we roll at SketchUp. Everybody carries their own chair. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Steve Jobs, you carry your own chair. That's how it is. Everybody carries their own chair. So note, Bryn carries his own chair. Here's Chris. Excellent. We've got a wired mic that you guys can use for answering questions. Let's see how that's going to work. So ideally, this reaches all the way over here. Okay. We don't have a wireless mic for the audience, but what I will do, let's just make sure that's on.
Hello?
Yeah, that works all right. Good. If anybody has a question, stand up and say your question, then I'll repeat it for everybody else. Does that work? Okay, so who has a question for these guys about SketchUp, Trimble, the future?
Morning, everybody. Before we go any further, I'd like to just take a minute to thank Aiden for planning this awesome event for all of you this week. He's done a fantastic job.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Okay, who has a question? Anybody? You, sir. Stand up. Let me try and repeat that, and you tell me if I got it. All right. Mr. Andrew here, who may win the award for having traveled the farthest. You're from Australia, yeah? Excellent. Very nicely done. It was a very long swim. Has essentially built a business by building a plugin that works on top of SketchUp. He got wind of the Trimble acquisition, put the brakes on for a while, and then is now waiting to see what happens before you continue to develop your thing. You want to know whether you should start an independent business or what the heck you should do. Or work with Trimble. Can you guys address that?
So, first of all, thank you for building something on our platform. And I think that's great. And I think it's exactly what we intended. And I think that's still exactly what we intend. Now, I think the question probably is, what if we build the same thing that you're building and won't we win? Right? I don't think it's a given that we'll win. And I think that what you can expect from us is transparency, absolutely egalitarian access to APIs. Anything that's available to everybody in this room is available to you. And fundamentally, we want you to be successful as well. Now, to be fair, Bryn would like us to be successful too. But I don't think that we have any magic better ideas than you might have. So I think let's let the market figure it out. I can't promise that we will or won't go in any particular direction. And I think at Trimble you can make some guesses about the sorts of things that are going to be more important to us than they were at Google maybe. But let's just figure it out as we go. Buy that.
Well, if I could just add to that, I think what you saw John show just earlier, we're committed to people building on the platform. The last thing we want to do is compete with you. So as John mentioned, we'll be very, very transparent. Second, just take whether it be in architecture in the US or architecture in Aussie or architecture in Europe, there's always a localization factor. And I think what we'd want to look at is, even if we were to build something, I think there's capability, or there's the opportunity for localized plugins that would fit in the model where maybe we become your customer in some cases as well. And we also want to look at how do we pool these plugins so that you can get them have customers outside of Aussie can potentially get access to those, and you can gain a revenue source there. So just like we're very supportive to distributors, we're very supportive to the developer network as well. I think if you're going to decide to develop something, ask these guys. They'll be open with you, and maybe we can guide you to say, okay, this is what we really need from an Aussie perspective or a New Zealand perspective or whatever specific region you may be serving.
Mr. Steve Oles, what do you have to say? So Mr. Steve Oles would like to know about the dynamic of the transition from Google to Trimble. Was this a friendly takeover, or was it a hostile takeover? Or was it just putting a computer in a car and driving it down to Trimble headquarters? We'll let Chris Keating address that.
Thanks for the question, Steve. It was a very friendly takeover. I can honestly say that even from Google's perspective, it was about finding a better home for SketchUp. And they believed what Trimble had to say from the other side of the table about investing in SketchUp, investing in the team, etc.
Who else do we have? I'm going to take somebody from the back. Put your hand way up if you've got a question. Way back in the back. Who's that? Mr. Daniel Tall. It seems like I know everybody, but it just happens to be these people are the people I know. So, Daniel, shout it out. Shout it proud. All right, so what Dan Tall, by the way, Dan Tall wrote the book about SketchUp and landscape architecture. It's probably the best book on SketchUp on the market right now. He's got another book coming out next year on SketchUp and rendering. Fantastic. Dan's giving a presentation tomorrow, so you should pay attention to that. His question, though, is about point cloud data. Point cloud data is when you have a model made up of all these little dots, right? It's done from making a 3D scan or something. I don't understand it. But anyway, what you end up is these like huge, giant, big models. And what Dan wants to know is what are we going to do about that in SketchUp?
Yeah, and I know where Dan lives, so be careful what you ask. No, point cloud data is, in fact, becoming much more important, and I believe there's a firm that makes laser scanners, Trimble. So it's obviously very important to us, whether the scan comes... What's that?
Flying robots.
Yes, we need flying robots. We have them. Trimble has flying robots that take LiDAR and everything. So it's becoming quite important to us. We are looking in from an engineering standpoint and incorporating some of that stuff. Nothing to announce yet, but large terrain meshes and point clouds are an obvious direction of work for us at Trimble.
Somebody from that side over there. Yes, sir. Stand up. Who is that? I can't see. Phil Rader. I happen to know you too. Excellent. Good. Go. So let me paraphrase for Phil there. That's a great question. You may not know, but Trimble makes this thing called a total station. And basically what it is like a robot, laser robot that sits on a tripod. And you can give it data, right? You know, normally it takes somebody like with string and a measuring tape or something to lay out the points of a foundation on a building. Well, what this thing actually does is you set it up at a known location, and it'll actually put a point, like a laser dot, on the ground where they're supposed to put the stake, where they're actually supposed to put the foundation. It's revolutionizing things like, obviously, construction, but also mining and all this stuff. It's kind of a big meat and potatoes for Trimble. What Phil's getting at is, wouldn't it be great if SketchUp could actually integrate with that even better, right? What if you could actually take a SketchUp model and say, help me put this on the ground? Wouldn't that be neat? The second question you had was, how much is SketchUp going to basically be integrated into this stack of other technologies that Trimble has? Is that kind of what you're talking about? Okay, go ahead.
So this is an easy one, actually. So I'll answer the second question first. How much is it going to be integrated in the stack? A lot. Okay. And then the first question, as it happens, the first SketchUp Trimble integration has already been released, and it is a tool which allows you to send points from a SketchUp model to a robotic total station. It's a product called it's in a product called Trimble Field Link, and you know your surveyor probably already knows about it. So, job done. But expect to see more of that kind of stuff in the future.
Got Alex down here in the front. Alex Schreier is an architect out of Boston, I believe. Yeah. Who? A which? Amherst. Amherst, Massachusetts. He also, Amherst. Anyway, he also has, it seems like everybody has a book coming out, right? It's so easy. He has a book coming out next year as well that's specifically targeted at architects with a bent towards Ruby scripting and things. So if you're kind of an egghead when it comes to the way you build things and you want to do Ruby, which is kind of what this conference is about in a lot of ways, Alex has the book for you coming out very soon. Your question was... yes. So the thing we did at Basecamp last time is we actually let you shout feature requests at us, and we put them all up. And then we used that as the basis for what we were going to do over the next couple of years. And believe me, that was incredibly helpful. You would like to do something like that again? On a regular basis.
So that's definitely something we've talked about and considered. So I think if actually think back to the last Basecamp, we hit a couple of things off of that board already, and some of them were around the features that I talked about here, easier plugin installs. The Ruby toolbars are still chaotic, and we're still working on that one. I think the shadow bug was on that list. And actually, one of the things I'm the most proud about from the last Basecamp was the set of features that's now called the advanced camera tools. There was an unconference session. Yeah, we got one fan. There was an unconference session with a bunch of folks that work in the film industry, and we sat there and listened to all the things that were wrong with SketchUp for the film industry, and then went away and built a new plugin. So I think that you should expect us to behave in that way in the future. I don't have any particular system in mind yet today to make it easier to submit feature requests to the SketchUp team regularly, but I'm certainly open to doing an unconference session where we specifically, sit there with a whiteboard and talk about things you guys would like to see.
Is that satisfying to you, Alex? Satisfying to everyone else? Everybody's welcome to come back here or to John's house every month to tell him what they would like to see in SketchUp 9. We've got time for two more questions. So the question, I'm going to get you, and then I'm going to get Diego down here, all right? What's your name, sir?
Stephen Walsh.
Stephen Walsh. Hey. Okay, so your question is about the 3D warehouse and what we call building product manufacturers, right? So people who make sinks and plumbing stuff like Kohler, or people who make windows like Marvin, or people who make all of the other millions of things that you might actually want to put in a project, right down to things like furniture, which you might have from a furniture store. What is the story going forward with those people specifically and the 3D warehouse? And when is that data going to get smart? When is the sofa going to know it's a sofa and not just a picture of a sofa? Is that your question? All right.
And I think the answer to this question really lies in the history of 3D Warehouse itself. 3D Warehouse was started at Google and primarily as a repository for geomodels on their way to get into Google Earth. So as such, it wasn't as well concentrated on the AEC world that is often our main business. We are rebuilding the 3D warehouse from scratch. The prior one is entirely on Google technologies. And I think it's safe to say that we're going to have a real strong emphasis on what you're talking about, making smarter components. In fact, we've been referring to it as the content warehouse internally since coming to Trimble. So more of a focus on components.
Yeah, let me add one thing. I kind of glossed over it in my slides, but actually, how many of you have submitted a model to 3D Warehouse? Okay, it's not quite everybody. As it turns out, there are, in fact, millions of models in 3D Warehouse, and there are like 1,000 new ones going up every week. And they are models of everything under the sun, anything imaginable. We think that's been a really good strategy to get coverage in 3D Warehouse, but what that hasn't really gotten us is consistent coverage. So we are thinking about that, and I think you'll see us make more proactive efforts in that direction.
All right, last question from Mr. Wait, I have the last question down here. I promise we might get back to this a little bit later on, but always you're welcome to come up and ask these nice folks questions individual if you like. Right now we've got a last question from Diego Matho down here in the front, who is from Boston, right? Yeah. Another Massachusettsanite. Uruguay, pardon me. So Diego's question, Diego's an academic, it should be stated. He's very interested in something called, what did you call it? Natural user interface. And he said that, I'm sorry?
That would be called a NUI.
Newbie?
Natural.
This is boring for people. Natural user interface, I guess, has something to do with the way people intuitively would use software rather than clicking panels and buttons and opening dialog boxes and things like that. So Diego would like to know what kind of progress we're doing incorporating all the new research that's come up about that since SketchUp was launched 12 years ago into SketchUp. And also, what was the second thing?
Ease of use in terms of program development.
Ease of use in terms of actual the programming environment for SketchUp, for the layperson. All right. How do you connect to the non-software engineer for building plugins for SketchUp? Go ahead.
Diego, those are huge questions. how much time? How are we doing on time here?
We are, let's see, we have minus 2 minutes.
Okay, excellent. So let me put it to you. I mean, we've talked about this kind of stuff over the years. So I actually have a great friend here in Colorado at the University of Colorado who runs a lab called the Center for Lifelong Learning and Design, which is not adult continuing ed. It's actually a very serious human-computer interface research group. And we have a kind of a regular breakfast argument about these kinds of topics. I think it's probably fair to say that what we've spent the most time on recently is thinking about how to engage a community of people in the development of new features for SketchUp. How can you build a community of creative people who have access to a very profound API, which is at the same time at a high enough level that it's usable? And I bet that there are more than a couple of people in the room here who have never written any programs before, but had their first experience programming in Ruby for SketchUp. Am I right about that? Is there anybody in here? A couple people at least. And so I think that's something we're quite proud of, and I think that you'll see us continue to work on those kinds of things going forward. Dynamic components were actually an experiment along the same lines, that Ruby is a little bit hard. You have to kind of write programmer-looking syntax. Dynamic components are a little bit easier, but they're still deeply and profoundly programmable. So we are experimenting at several different layers in that kind of stack of usability. And then, of course, the SketchUp application, the UI for SketchUp is something that we all care a lot about as well. So, and then for further argument on these topics, I think probably we should have a beer.
Or on
or two, maybe. Thanks.
Thank you very much, guys.